The grand hall of the Washington Peace Forum was filled with quiet anticipation as Senator Ron Johnson rose from his seat. The lights reflected determination in his eyes as he walked toward the podium. For months, political tension had been boiling over. Harsh words, bitter debates, and deep divisions marked every exchange between rival parties. But on this day, something unexpected was about to unfold. Representative Crockett Johnson began, his voice steady yet firm, echoing across the silent auditorium. "I've carefully reviewed your national peace initiative. And despite our political differences, I must say this, your framework represents the most thoughtful and balanced plan for unity I've seen in my entire career. Today, I'm proud to officially endorse it." The crowd, a mix of lawmakers, journalists, and citizens, sat in stunned disbelief. Then slowly the sound of applause began to rise. Within moments, the room erupted into thunderous cheers. What had just happened wasn't a simple endorsement. It was a turning point that could redefine American politics. If you value moments when leadership rises above partisanship, please like this video and subscribe for more inspiring stories that highlight unity over division. To understand why Senator Johnson's support for Representative Jasmine Crockett's peace plan stunned the political world, we need to look at their contrasting journeys and the divided America they sought to heal. Senator Ron Johnson, a longtime conservative, built his legacy on fiscal discipline and traditional values. Before entering politics, he ran a successful manufacturing business and became known for his straightforward, sometimes combative approach. Supporters praised his consistency. Critics claimed he contributed to political stalemates. "Senator Johnson has always put conviction above convenience," said analyst Maria Reynolds. His record shows unwavering alignment with conservative principles for over 15 years. Representative Jasmine Crockett, on the other hand, followed a very different path. A former civil rights attorney, she devoted her career to fighting for equality and uplifting marginalized voices. Her rise in Congress was marked by passionate advocacy for justice and reform. While progressives saw her as a rising star, conservative media painted her as too radical. Amid growing polarization following the midterm elections, America's divisions deepened. Cable news exaggerated extremes, social media silenced moderation, and trust in government hit historic lows. Political debate turned toxic. More insults than ideas. It was in this fractured climate that Crockett quietly began developing her National Unity and Peace Initiative, a policy plan focused on compromise, civic dialogue, and shared problem-solving. What makes Crockett's approach remarkable, explained political scientist Dr. Thomas Franklin, is that she doesn't avoid tough issues. She finds realistic middle ground, addressing both progressive and conservative concerns through smart, balanced policy design. We'd love your thoughts in the comments. What political divide do you believe most needs healing in our country today? The Washington Peace Forum, held in historic Constitution Hall, gathered lawmakers, activists, and journalists for a 3-day summit on national unity. Security was tight after extremist threats condemned the event as betrayal. When Crockett stepped onto the stage on day 2, the air was thick with tension. Many expected another partisan speech. But her calm, confident presence set a different tone. Behind her, the screen read, "A way forward together, the National Unity and Peace Initiative. I stand before you," she began, "not as a Democrat addressing Republicans, but as an American speaking to Americans about our shared future." This plan didn't come from party think tanks. It came from conversations with citizens across every background who are tired of division. In the front row, Senator Johnson watched skeptically at first, arms crossed. Cameras caught his reaction as she introduced her first proposal, a new vision for border security. "We can accept two truths at once," Crockett said. "First, the sovereign nation must secure its borders effectively. And second, that every person deserves dignity, and our immigration process must reflect our values. As a nation of opportunity." She presented pilot program data proving that enhanced technology and fair immigration reforms improved both safety and humanity at the border. "This isn't about left or right," she declared. "It's about what actually works." The senator uncrossed his arms, leaning in with interest. From education to healthcare, gun safety to environmental reform, Crockett outlined detailed, results-driven solutions that blended compassion with practicality. When she reached the topic of energy policy, she emphasized balance, strengthening domestic production for immediate needs while accelerating renewable innovation for the future. Her approach defied easy political labels: practical, data-based, and grounded in shared values. Communities built around traditional energy deserve economic security during any transition, Representative Crockett emphasized. But at the same time, we cannot ignore the growing impact and cost of climate change. Both realities demand our respect. In the front row, Senator Johnson was now fully engaged, pen in hand, jotting detailed notes as several attendees exchanged surprised glances. Few had ever seen him listen so intently to a political opponent. Then, midway through her presentation, an unexpected moment broke the calm. A well-known partisan commentator suddenly rose from the audience. "This is just another round of liberal wishful thinking," he shouted. "You're ignoring the fundamental differences between our values." A tense murmur swept across the hall as security approached. But before they could intervene, Crockett addressed the man directly, her tone calm. "Confident and disarmingly respectful, sir," she said. "I've actually covered your specific concern on page 43 of the proposal." The screens behind her shifted to that very section. "Your perspective represents many Americans who feel their values are being dismissed. I welcome your input after you've reviewed the full plan." Her response didn't just diffuse tension, it changed the energy in the room. The heckler, taken aback by her composure and inclusion, slowly sat down. Applause broke out from unexpected corners of the audience. Crockett then turned to the most powerful part of her presentation, the measurable cost of division. Charts and graphics filled the screens behind her, comparing the nation's projected outcomes under two paths: continued polarization versus a united policy framework. "The price of our division isn't just emotional or social," she said. "It's economic, educational, and even global. Every American is paying a real price for our inability to work together." The data was undeniable, showing lower productivity, decreased international competitiveness, and rising public health costs directly tied to polarization. "These aren't partisan talking points," Crockett explained. "They're verified findings from research institutions across the political spectrum." Her closing words landed with quiet force. "The beauty of America has always been our ability to correct course. Our greatest moments have come when leaders, regardless of party, chose courage over conflict." As her final slide faded, a heavy silence filled Constitution Hall. Everyone sensed the weight of what had just occurred. Would this ambitious national unity and peace initiative simply fade into the background of political noise, or had something changed? Senator Johnson remained seated, deep in thought. Cameras zoomed in as his legislative director leaned over to whisper something. Johnson shook his head slightly. Then, to everyone's surprise, he rose and began walking toward the stage. The crowd stirred, unsure what to expect. Given the political history between them, most assumed he'd offer cautious praise or polite critique. Instead, organizers quickly brought a second microphone to the front. "Representative Crockett," Johnson began, his voice steady but heavy with reflection. "I came here prepared to defend traditional conservative principles against what I assumed would be another progressive agenda." He paused, glancing at his notes. "Instead, I've heard something entirely different, a plan that doesn't dismiss concerns about government, overreach, or fiscal discipline, but integrates them with compassion and balance." The room leaned in. This was not the Ron Johnson they were expecting. "What strikes me most," he continued, "is that your framework doesn't force either side to surrender its core beliefs. It acknowledges the legitimacy behind opposing views and works to reconcile them." He turned slightly toward the audience, his tone sincere. "I've built my career fighting for conservative values, and I'll never stop. But today I'm reminded that our first duty is to the American people, not to party lines." Turning back to Crockett, he added, "Your border plan protects sovereignty while upholding human dignity. Your economic strategy preserves free markets while broadening opportunity. Your energy policy respects both present needs and future responsibility. The hall was silent except for the hum of cameras. Recording every word, Johnson took a breath, the moment of truth visible on his face. I've always believed good ideas should be judged by their merit, not their origin. In business, before politics, I would have implemented a plan this sound without hesitation. But somewhere along the way, politics trained us to reject good ideas simply because they came from across the aisle. He turned once more toward his fellow conservatives, to my Republican colleagues and supporters. Nothing in this plan contradicts our values of limited government, individual liberty, or fiscal restraint. In fact, it strengthens them in ways we've long advocated. A ripple of disbelief and then cautious applause moved through the audience. Everyone knew this was a historic moment. The camera zoomed in tighter. This was the image that would dominate headlines, trend across social media, and spark endless debate on cable news. Senator Ron Johnson, standing beside Representative Jasmine Crockett, offering bipartisan support for the National Unity and Peace Initiative. The Grand Hall fell completely silent as Senator Ron Johnson finished speaking. Representative Crockett, he said firmly, I've listened carefully to your peace initiative. And despite our many political differences, I have to say this, your plan is one of the most balanced and well-thought-out approaches to national unity I've seen in all my years of service. Today I'm officially endorsing it. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Reporters froze mid-sentence, photographers lowered their cameras, and even the event organizers stood still in disbelief. This wasn't a polite nod across the aisle. It was a full endorsement from one of the Senate's most partisan figures. Crockett looked momentarily stunned, but quickly composed herself and reached out her hand. Their handshake, steady and sincere, became the symbol of something much bigger, the physical bridge between two opposing worlds. Then, from the back of the hall, a single person began to clap. The applause grew, spreading across the room until the entire audience was on its feet. The ovation lasted almost 3 minutes. People who had entered the room divided by ideology were now standing side by side, united by a shared sense of hope, when the noise finally faded. Senator Johnson spoke again, his voice heavier with emotion. I'll be calling the Senate Majority Leader today, he announced, to start discussions on bringing parts of this plan forward for real legislative action. And I invite my colleagues from both parties to join me. 3 senior representatives, each from different political backgrounds, rose and approached the stage in solidarity. The sight of longtime political opponents standing together sent a clear message to the nation. Something truly extraordinary was beginning. Representative Crockett stepped back to the microphone, her confidence shining through despite the surprise of the moment. Senator Johnson, she said, your willingness to judge this plan by its substance rather than its source shows exactly the kind of leadership our country needs. This isn't about winning or losing, it's about moving forward together. Turning to the audience, she continued passionately, the challenges we face don't care about party labels. Climate change doesn't ask who you voted for. Economic hardship doesn't check political registration. And our global adversaries certainly don't target only one side. The truth is we either face these problems as one nation or we fall divided. Her tone grew stronger. This plan isn't perfect. No plan ever is. But it's a genuine attempt to respect every American's concerns. And with Senator Johnson's support, we finally have a real chance to turn unity into action. The moment grew even more remarkable when Senator Dianne Morales, a progressive known for her frequent clashes with Johnson, stood up from the opposite side of the hall. Walking toward the stage, she said with conviction, if Ron Johnson and Jasmine Crockett can find common ground, then so can we. Count me in. The crowd erupted once again in powerful applause, louder than before. Reporters frantically called their editors. Knowing they were witnessing something rare, a shift in the tone of American politics. As the formal session ended, cameras captured Johnson and Crockett talking earnestly, already discussing next steps and potential challenges. One by one, more lawmakers from both sides joined the conversation, forming a growing circle of cautious optimism outside the venue. Citizens who had watched the live stream were already sharing the moment online. Hashtags like #UnityPossible and #AmericaTogether began trending within minutes, marking one of the few times political news went viral for positive reasons. Within an hour, clips of the endorsement had surpassed 2 million views, and comment sections, usually filled with division, were surprisingly civil. "In 30 years of covering politics," said veteran journalist Edward Barnes, not realizing his mic was live, "I honestly didn't think I'd ever see this again." At the back of the hall, an elderly couple stood watching with tears in their eyes. "My father fought in World War II, the woman said softly. "He always told me that Americans could disagree fiercely, but still come together when it mattered. I thought that spirit was gone." Her husband gently squeezed her hand. "Maybe not," he replied. "Maybe not." In the days following the Washington Peace Forum, political analysts scrambled to make sense of what quickly became known simply as the moment. Cable networks that usually thrived on division were now highlighting a rare outbreak of cooperation. Senator Johnson's endorsement of Representative Crockett's peace initiative is far more than a political gesture, explained Dr. Eleanor Richards, a respected presidential historian. It could mark the beginning of a new era, one where the national interest finally rises above partisan loyalty. The impact was immediate. Within just 48 hours, 16 senators and 27 representatives from both parties had signed a statement backing the core principles of the National Unity and Peace Initiative. Even more astonishing was the public's reaction. "We're seeing something unprecedented," said pollster James Morrison from the National Opinion Research Center. "Support for this plan isn't limited by party or ideology. 72% of Americans approve, including 68% of Republicans and 76% of Democrats." But as analysts dug deeper into the data, they discovered something even more profound, a renewed sense of shared faith that unity in America might still be possible. When people were asked what they liked most about the new plan, the responses weren't split by political party. Supporters from both Republican and Democratic sides found common ground, appreciating many of the same ideas. For the first time in decades, shared American values that had been buried under political division began to shine through again. Even on social media, often a place for angry debates and arguments, a new tone started to appear. Citizens began sharing inspiring stories of cooperation across party lines using hashtags born from this growing sense of unity. Community groups across the nation organized unity dinners, inviting neighbors with different political opinions to sit together and talk about the issues they all cared about. It turned out that Americans were never truly divided on what they wanted. They were simply speaking in different ways about the same shared goals. 2 years after that defining moment, a national survey revealed something no one had seen in decades. Public trust in government institutions was actually rising instead of falling. Even more surprisingly, Americans said they now trusted neighbors with opposing political views more than before. Mental health experts began to notice another unexpected improvement. Rates of anxiety, depression, and social isolation started to decline as people began to repair the emotional damage caused by years of political hostility. Political division had been tearing communities apart, explained Dr. Jennifer Garcia. Now that people are rebuilding relationships, we're seeing measurable gains in emotional well-being. Human beings are wired for a connection, and that connection had been missing. The Johnson-Crockett approach, as it became known, didn't erase political disagreements, said sociologist Dr. Maria Hernandez, but it changed how people disagreed. Across the nation, citizens started realizing that most Americans, regardless of party, still want the same basic things: safety, opportunity, freedom, and dignity. They just have different ideas about how to reach them. International leaders soon took notice. Lawmakers from divided democracies traveled to the United States, to study this new experiment in unity and explore how it might work in their own countries. Universities launched research programs and fellowships to better understand the conditions that had made this social shift possible. Even the United Nations Secretary General mentioned the Johnson-Crockett framework in a speech about global cooperation, describing it as a model for resolving conflicts without forcing people to take rigid sides. 5 years later, at an anniversary event honoring the original moment, Senator Johnson and Representative Jasmine Crockett, now co-chairs of the National Unity Foundation, reflected on their partnership. Respect doesn't mean agreement, Johnson shared. It means listening seriously to someone's concerns and solving problems that matter, not just trying to win an argument. Crockett added, "I've learned that there's wisdom on every side of our debates. When we stop demonizing each other and start working together, we find that our differences often reveal complementary truths." Johnson smiled as he recalled their early collaboration. "At first, we both assumed one of us would eventually have to give up our core values. But that never happened, because we weren't trying to change each other's minds. We were trying to address each other's valid concerns at the same time." Crockett nodded in agreement. "The real breakthrough," she said, "came when we stopped focusing on what policies looked like and started focusing on the results they produced. Conservatives want government that works efficiently, so do progressives. Progressives want opportunity for every community, and conservatives do too. We were always reaching for the same goals, just describing them differently." The audience, filled with Americans from all political backgrounds who had embraced the unity principles in their own towns, stood in applause. At the ceremony's close, organizers unveiled a simple plaque to be placed in Constitution Hall. It read, "Our differences need not divide us when we honor the dignity within every perspective and the shared hopes behind opposing views. Unity is not uniformity, it is the courageous choice to seek understanding before victory." Later, studies revealed that children who started school after this period showed strikingly different attitudes about politics. When faced with opposing opinions, they naturally looked for shared values instead of picking sides. "We might be seeing the rise of a new political culture," observed education researcher Dr. Michael Patel. "These kids see compromise not as weakness, but as creative problem solving. If this continues, it could redefine American democracy for generations." The story of Senator Ron Johnson's unexpected endorsement of Jasmine Crockett's peace initiative became a lasting example of how real leadership can rise above partisanship. It reminded Americans that courage in politics isn't about fighting harder for one side. It's about seeing beyond sides altogether to serve the common good. If this story inspired you, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. In a world where the news often focuses on division, we aim to highlight stories that prove Americans can still find common ground. Remember, each of us has the power to be a bridge builder, to listen, respect, and create the kind of nation we all want for our children. America's challenges are real and complex, and differences will always exist. But as the Johnson-Crockett partnership proved, solving them requires not just debate, but the kind of moral courage that dares to connect across divides. In your own life, think about how you can apply this lesson. Engage with others not as enemies to defeat, but as fellow citizens who hold pieces of the same truth. The strength of our democracy depends on people who can combine strong convictions with open-minded respect, the very qualities that made the Johnson-Crockett moment possible.